All
Bill
right.
McCoy shared a post.
I know that guy. At work, my name changed from Bo to Charles, and it like has completely just like changed my whole work social like life because no one can find Bo anymore,
Right?
and everybody's calling me Charles. And I'm in like meetings where, I used to attend the meeting as Bo, and now I'm Charles, and people are like, people that used to call me Bo or that don't actually know me are like now calling me Charles, and they don't know what happened to Bo. It's like it's almost like the episode of Seinfeld where Elaine and Susie, remember? And then
Oh yeah.
Elaine has to figure out a way to kill off Susie to continue the story as Elaine. I got like that real life situation going on right now where like no one knows he quit showing up to work, and this Charles guy started showing up in his place.
You went from Bo to the now more respectable Charles.
Yeah, I know, right? Charles is so much more debonair. I probably, maybe I'm at the age now where I should be going by Charles. I should just do a whole flip.
Right? Change your whole look, everything.
Start wearing cardigans. Welcome to Fireside Palaver, a literary podcast. I whenever I wrote the show notes, I didn't have like a catchphrase there, and then naturally, just now we started saying your internet book club, or what did I say? Your
internet book club, yeah.
Fireside Palaver, your internet book club, episode 8. We're streaming straight to YouTube at ECN Radio. But you can find the podcast on iTunes or anywhere podcasts are stored, and that's by Fireside Palaver. You can join our Discord. I have a link to that in the show notes. And if you have any recommendations for books that we should read and cover on the show, leave a comment on our YouTube channel. Leave a comment where you see the video on Facebook, or drop us a line in Discord. I want to get that Discord activity back up. Like I basically just use it right now for like taking notes and for doing podcasts.
Right.
But it needs to be social again. So jump on Discord and tell us some books we should read. We actually got a recommendation from Kelly, friend of the show. He wants us to do a Vampire Hunter D graphic novel. And he sent me some links so that we can read it and have him on to do the review with us at some point. But and then I guess he's reading more books in this same universe, or he wants to tell us all about it. So that'll be different. We haven't done a graphic novel yet on Fireside Palaver, so that'll be unique. This episode, we're going to go over some Brandon Sanderson news. There's lots of news items that have come out relating to him. There's actually a Spotify audiobook news. And we both recently just got back from family trips, and probably some discussions surrounding that, as well as Horrorstor. We're going to tell you about a book we read called Horrorstor, and give you a progress update on Oathbringer. And I got news for you. We haven't made it very far. We're still working on Oathbringer. It turned out to be a much larger chunk than I realized it was going to be.
Huge.
So how's your week been, man? How have you been since the last episode?
Well, I've been off all this week, so that's been good.
Dude, you are off more than anybody I know.
Well, it's this one I actually planned on being off. The other ones were definitely not planned. So
okay, yeah.
I had the back issue, and then got COVID. So that whole thing. So that was all leading up. Me and Cooper went to Disney and Universal this past weekend, and so leading up to it, I'm like, okay, I can't get sick, whatever. Just gotta get strong because of my back thing, whatever.
Yeah.
So we were gonna play D&D that one time, and I was like, well, Cooper's got COVID.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we had to cancel our D&D game because Coop got COVID, but you hadn't gotten it yet.
But I hadn't gotten it yet, so fast forward a couple days, that I think it was the Friday. It was a Thursday. I got home from work and I was eating something and I was like, oh man, my tooth is hurting a little bit. And I'm like, what was that? And because I bit down, it like gave me pain. And it hurt, but nothing terrible. Well, then the next day I woke up and my tooth was really hurting. So, God, I was like, my wife was like, you should call a dentist, and our dentist is closed on Fridays. So I was like, I'll just whatever. I'll try and tough it out. Well, Saturday comes along, and it's like really bad, and so I was like, well, I'll just have to find an emergency dentist, whatever. Well, apparently there are no emergency dentists anywhere close to this area. Like,
yeah,
I found one in Atlanta and one up in North Carolina somewhere. So I was like, whatever. So my wife is calling our dentist, like messaging him. He calls in like an antibiotic because that's usually, some kind of infection.
Yeah.
Right. So he gives me. So we go get this thing and I start taking them, and Sunday it's not any better. And so, later on Saturday it's getting worse. And so he calls me in a stronger antibiotic and prednisone, which I'd been taking for my back too.
Yeah.
So like I'm taking antibiotics, I'm taking the prednisone, like really strong antibiotics too.
You're on double antibiotics.
Like double antibiotics essentially. And then I find out that the pain goes away, but then I find out I'm positive for COVID. And I'm just like, really? The hits just keep on coming, right?
Yeah, you got, and you're laid up
with
your back.
I didn't get sick. I did not get sick at all. I got a headache and I was tired and my throat hurt maybe a little bit, but it wasn't, but that is literally all. And the only thing we can figure is from the medication I've been taking for my back, then the medication for my tooth and all that, I'm just loaded with steroids and antibiotics, and it just knocked out everything from COVID. So I got through that. No, but then like, they were like, yeah, you can't come to work. So I had to sit out 7 days there. And then literally I came back and worked 4 days and then was on vacation again, or 5 days. And I don't know if but I don't know if you worked with Logan.
I remember
he was in computers, and then he came. Okay, well, like he was working as same thing with me. Well, he left. His last day was the day before I left for vacation, so they haven't had a repair person there for 10 days. I don't know what they've been doing. I go back tomorrow. I guess I'll find out.
It's gonna be piled up. You're gonna have piles
who knows?
Piles.
Hopefully, when I was out, because the other thing was when I got COVID, Logan got COVID too, so he had to be out too. So both of us were out that week. Yeah, and they called some people from Greenville to come down and work. So I'm
surprised they haven't called me trying to get me to come back in.
Right? But funny. Yeah, so then I made my biggest issue was how I was going to do for 3 days walking around Disney and Universal, because I mean, like my foot's still numb and I made it. I mean, we had thought about maybe having to rent one of those electric cart scooter things, but I mean, I just kind of dragged around, but it was fun. That was actually my first time I've ever been to Disney or Universal.
Oh, really?
And I never got to go. When I was living in Louisiana with my mom, my dad and stepmom and stepbrother came down to Louisiana, and they picked me and my sister up, and we went to New Orleans, went to the World's Fair, and then we went to Florida to the beach, and then we went home. Now they swear up and down to this day that they asked if we wanted to go to Disney, and we said no. And I was like, none of the three of us remember this at all. And I'm like, what kind of kids would say no to going to Disney? Like, I was like, y'all are just full of it. Y'all didn't want to go, so y'all made up some story about, whatever. But
yeah,
it was fun. I enjoyed it. I will say Disney is more of a experience, whereas Universal is more for rides and all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think I enjoy Universal more than Disney.
Yeah, I did too. Now, I love the Star Wars stuff.
Yeah, none of that existed whenever I went. Yeah,
but he was Cooper's really into Harry Potter. And
Yeah.
Harry Potter at Universal was just awesome. Like it was awesome. But the funny thing was we agreed that the best ride out of all the parks was the Krusty Land ride in the Simpsons part of Universal. It was awesome. Like it was totally awesome. Like if you were a Simpsons fan, it was like you were in an episode of The Simpsons.
That's great.
And it was just so funny.
I haven't even seen that. That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, it's a lot to do. Like you can't do Disney in 2 days and you can't do Universal in 1 day. So I mean, we had to hit the high spots and then but again, I don't see how you can afford to do it more though either. So that's the other thing.
That's the way whenever I went as a kid, I went with like a church youth group and we did 1 day in each park and it was like a blur. I mean, yeah, I didn't really get the full Disney experience, but it was enough to say that I did it. You know what I mean? There was another time that I thought I was going to get to go. So I volunteered for a trip. I volunteered for work one time. They needed somebody to go to Orlando, and they were going to spend like a corporate day at one of the parks. It was actually not Disney. I don't know if it was Universal or where they went, but they needed an IT person to go and basically be like a help desk for all these sales reps that don't normally see an IT person.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, we'll set you up with a booth and, people will bring you their laptop. And, if they have a problem, you'll, just do what you normally do. Cause at that time I was working like at a help desk. So it was basically like, you're just going to be the help desk, but at this hotel in Orlando. And I thought, oh, this will be great. I'll get to just chill, eat some, some nice hotel. Cause it was like a swanky hotel. I'm going to eat some nice swanky hotel food. And like, I'll be done at 3:00 every day. And I'll jump on the bus and take a free trip to Universal or whatever. That was the busiest. I was there for an entire week. I was there from Monday we came home on Friday or Saturday. That was the busiest week I've ever worked in my entire life. I was working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day. I never left. I walked from my hotel room to the room that they had me, and it was this
right.
And I was there with this older lady that had been with the company for like 45 years or something. And it was just me and her. And like, I'm telling you, we worked our ass off for an entire week. I mean, we had stacks of laptops, piled up behind us at the table because these sales representatives, they never see an IT person. So they have like a laundry list of things that they want to get done. Every single one of them. I mean, it was insane. I never saw the outside of that hotel. And then not only did I not get to go to Disney, but I ended up getting stuck in Orlando because it was like a weekend that it snowed in Atlanta, which, is like the apocalypse in Atlanta. They can't handle it. And somehow the snow caused a fire at the airport. It caused some kind of electrical fire. So the Atlanta airport is both frozen and on fire at the same time. And they just,
that's pretty good.
I was stuck for an extra day in Orlando, and everybody that was with the company, that they split the flights up. Some people flew into North Carolina and some people flew into Atlanta, and all the people that flew into North Carolina got home. But I was the only person from IT that flew into Atlanta. So I'm like there basically by myself.
Since we got you for an extra day, let me ask you this.
It was like I know. Yeah. So I stuck working on more stuff.
Did you ever do the banking thing up at Furman?
No.
Okay. I did that a couple summers, and that was kind of like what you sound like.
Yeah.
We went in and we would set up, they would give all these bankers like Chromebooks or Surfaces or something like that, and we would install Office on it. And then we would sit in the lobby of they would split us up. There was like maybe 3 or 4 buildings that they did these classes in for bankers. And we would sit in the lobby in case they had any questions. I sat there 3-4 days, never had like maybe 2 people ask me a question. It'd be something like, oh, my internet's not working. And it'd be like, oh, you're not connected to the right, internet thing for Furman. Here, let me show you. Yeah. And that was it. And the rest of the time I just sat there like watching movies and stuff like that. That's
the way I thought this was going to be.
Right?
It was the opposite. It was like literally me, the older lady I work with, she's no longer, she's retired now, but her name was Irene. Me and Irene had just like stacks. I mean, like there's no system. We're writing people's last name on a sticky note and sticking it to the laptop. Like there's no
Right.
system to organize these things or anything. It was like a madhouse.
But I'll tell you one good thing for us this time when we were in both Disney and Universal. Well, more Disney.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's talking about lines and stuff like that, and we blew through, like, we hardly waited at all for anything.
How does that work? Because that's why I'm scared to go right now, is because the way I hear it is like, not only is there a line for everything, but like everybody uses the fast pass lines, but then those are so utilized that like they have an extreme line. Like how does this, how does the tier
Disney's
system of
weird.
lines work?
So they have what's called the Genie Plus.
Yeah.
And it's only $15 per ticket, but you can only use it 3 times for 3 rides. So you can get in that line. Now, what we noticed is there's 2 entrances, so there'll be like, you know, lightning lane and regular. And if the line starts getting long in the lightning, they just let, you know, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 to 1 that they'll let in. So like it mixes when you get to the end. They'll if the lightning lane starts getting backed up, they let more and more people through, and then they'll let just a few people from the regular line. But with Disney, since you can only use it for 3 different rides, it wasn't too bad. And the thing is like the longest thing we stood in line for over the 2 days was the Slinky Dog ride in Toy Story Land, which is very like everyone kept saying, you know, the Rise of the Resistance ride in Star Wars and Galaxy's Edge. You're going to wait a long time. My dad was like, he would time it. He was like, we're going to see how long it takes us. We got through the line and rode the ride and got out in 45 minutes.
That's crazy.
So the first day we were there, we were doing all kinds of stuff, and we got over to Toy Story Land. We did a bunch of Star Wars stuff first, and we went to Toy Story Land. And right before that, it started raining. Like, me and Cooper had gone into this thing in Star Wars where you got to meet characters. We got to meet Darth Vader and have our picture taken and stuff. And we walked out, it started sprinkling. And my dad was like, hey, I'm over here at this restaurant sitting outside under an umbrella. And so we went over there. As soon as we got to the umbrella, I mean, it just torrential downpour.
Yeah. And
so we waited there for a little while, and we had some other things we had to do later that we had reservations for. So it basically, I mean, it was sprinkling a little bit. So we walked over we were right there at Toy Story Land. So we walked over the Slinky Dog ride, walked right up. As soon as we basically walk into the ride, it starts raining really hard again. So we get on the ride. Dude, when I say it was like riding, somebody was holding a water hose on full blast, spraying you in the face.
But they let you do it, though.
And they let you do it. So we did that. And so the next day, when we only, like I said, we did 2 days of Disney. So we were didn't have time for much else. So Cooper was like, I'd like to ride that again to see what it's like when it's not torrential downpour. So we're like, cool. We go over there. It says it's a 55-minute wait. It took us an hour and 40 minutes to get to the ride.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where we were like, we could leave. And then we were like, no, we're going to see this through kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, and the only reason why we saw the 55-minute, and like a lot of those rides, it would say 55 or 60 minutes. It would take 15 or 20 minutes. So we were like, oh, it says 55 minutes. Yeah. We're going to blow through this thing like normal. Well, no. But I mean, it was a fun ride. So
we had David Gregory. Thanks. Howdy. Nice to see you too. We had I've had 2 experiences that relate to what you just described. So one, the first time Becca and I went to New York, we wanted to go to this cookie dough place that had just opened up, and it was like it was just like a cookie, like it was like an ice cream place, but it was cookie dough. And Becca had seen it on like YouTube or something. Well, it was literally a 3-hour wait to get into this place and then buy cookie dough. And then as we were walking back to our hotel, I was like, I don't even like this, and I threw it away. It was just the
That's
experience of
stupid.
waiting in line and talking. Like we were
Right.
like we were talking to the people in front of and behind us, and they're like, "Oh, you guys sound like you're from somewhere else. Where are y'all from?" And we were like talking and
Right.
everything. And then, "Are you excited about this cookie dough?" "Yeah, man, I heard about it on YouTube." And then, like literally, when we got to the subway station to get back to our hotel, I was like, "I don't even want this," and I just threw it away. Um, but
Well, that was, we went to, when we were at Harry Potter,
yeah.
um, we got down the section. There's I forgot what it was called, where they do the butter beer.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, butter beer. We got to get some butter beer.
You didn't do the
So
big turkey leg, did you? That's like another famous Disney
no,
thing.
I didn't. I saw people eating that, but I went and got, it was a plastic cup, maybe like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like $9 for a butter beer.
Yeah.
And
Cruise ship prices.
Right. Go over and give Cooper, and I started drinking. I thought it was great. I sucked it down. And Cooper's like, he goes, yeah, I forgot. I don't like butter beer.
Is that what you were doing whenever you were butt dialing me?
Probably.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yes.
I was cutting grass and I kept getting a call from you, and I was like, "Well, it might be. I know you're having back trouble recently." I was like, "It might be something important. I better find out what's going on." And I could just hear you tell the Cooper, like, "Go sit down. Go sit down."
It could have been.
Like right there. Go sit down.
Dude. So then he goes, yeah, I don't like butter beer.
Yeah.
Because whatever. So it was like a $9 drink. So I sucked it down too. So I had two, and I'm like, oh God, I'm about to die. So he goes, I want another drink. And there's this orange juice drink.
Yeah.
And he was like, I love orange juice. So he goes and gets it. Sips it. Yeah, I don't like that either. And that was like $8. Like, you just spent like $40 in drinks here. And like, dude, I don't understand how people can afford this crap. But anyway.
Oh yeah, no, it's crazy expensive. But talking about the riding a roller coaster like in the rain. So Six Flags, I remember every time I went to Six Flags, if it started drizzling, they shut the park down. Yeah, they didn't run in the rain whatsoever. Like, an insurance liability or something. We were at Carowinds one year, and it started just like the bottom, like what you're describing, the bottom fell out, just downpour. And they still ran all the rides. And we were on roller coasters that were exactly like what you're saying, where it's like just like bombarded with like huge raindrops, just drenched in water. And it was the most fun. That's the most fun at a theme park I've ever had. It was a blast.
Like I couldn't see a thing we were doing. I had my glasses on. They were just fogged and water. And I'm just like, I know we're on a roller coaster. I don't know where it's going or whatever, but
yeah, it was like we rode every single ride. There was no lines for anything. And it was like every ride is a water ride now,
Exactly. That's funny.
Let's get into some literary news, and then I'll tell you all about Dragon Con, and we'll dive into Horrorstor and Oathbringer. So right off the bat, audiobooks. We've discussed on the show before the battle between the Google audiobook, I think it's called Google Play Books, and of course Audible, the current reigning champion of audiobooks. Well, now there is a third contender. I'm sure there's a dozen more, but there's another one that just entered the ring. Spotify is not only doing music, they are doing they do podcasts, and now they're doing audiobooks. And I looked, I just, by the time I heard about this, they were already doing it. So like you can go get an audiobook on Spotify, and I'm sure they're going to flesh out, or I hope they're going to flesh out and make their interface a little better for audiobooks. But I looked at it before we went on the air, just so I could kind of get an idea for like the way their pay model is and that sort of thing. So there's no additional fee or anything like that. It's just a normal Spotify. You can either use it for free with ads, or you can pay the monthly and get rid of the ads. But you buy the books. The books, it's like the way it is in the Google Play books, where it's like if you were to buy Oathbringer on Spotify, actually I'm gonna look it up and see how much it is. But I looked up a different book earlier, and it was like the same price that it is on Google on the Google
Okay.
Play. So it's similar to actually buying the physical book. Like it's like
Right.
$25 for an audiobook. I just don't think I kind of like the way Audible does it, where you do the you do the what do they call
Right.
it? The token thing.
The credits per
Credit.
month
Yeah,
or
you get a
whatever.
credit, 1 credit per month. So you pay a monthly fee, but the monthly fee is cheaper than the cost of one book.
Right.
And you get one free credit. So essentially you're just getting one you're paying for one book, at least one a month. And so if
And when
you
you're listening to something like Oathbringer that's 57 hours long, that's
right.
multiple months.
Yeah, I know. And that's
You build up
always
credits.
that's always been my that's always been my thing too. Oh, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry for people that may have missed that small section. We're technical difficulties. We're back streaming now, and I hit record. So if it happens again, I won't lose it. But yeah, so Spotify doing audiobooks now. It's brand new. Hopefully they improve their interface, because I think it's kind of lackluster right now. I never really felt like they caught up on the podcast thing. It was like they just added podcasts to their already existing music interface, and they never really made any like real changes. Like whenever I look through the Spotify app, it's just like I search for a song, and in the midst of it showing me song titles, I may also get a podcast related to the same search.
I've noticed that too.
Yeah, and I don't really like the way that works. And now it's going to be audiobooks too. Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't know that anybody asked for this, Spotify, and it doesn't seem all that different than. It seems worse than Audible, and it doesn't seem all that different than what Google's doing. So I don't really know that it's even worth it. But keep doing you. We have oh, this is an old news article. We actually discussed it on a recording, but it was the episode that I accidentally deleted, where it was the first time we tried to do the drawing of the three. So Brandon Sanderson's next Stormlight Archive book probably won't arrive next year. So Sanderson has said that because of how busy he is working on other projects, but specifically working on a Hollywood adaptation, or I think the way he phrased it was, "This is the year Hollywood came calling." He's shopping for movie and television adaptations of I don't know that it's Stormlight specific or if it's Cosmere specific. Do you know anything about that? Let's see. There's some quotes in this article. I'll see if there's anything in here. But one thing I've been thinking about lately is, I think we're all assuming that it's a Stormlight Archive, and I'm even thinking like a TV show. But what if it's a Cosmere TV show that's more of like an anthology, like episodes will be from, there'll be like a Mistborn, episode, and then Stormlight episode. Like it's like a jump through all the different Cosmere, things. I really want to see a Stormlight Archive show, like straight up. Like I just want to be focused on that, but I know that he has mentioned how they might portray Sprin, and I think that is a Stormlight specific thing. So yeah, it must be Stormlight specific. But so he says that the book will likely be in 2024, possibly not until fall of 2024. Yeah, and there is he says
revisions.
Yeah, he says that this book, he wants this book more than any other. He feels like is important enough to give that level of detail. He wants to have extra time for revisions. And, just apparently we haven't read the fourth book yet, so we don't really know what this book could entail, but apparently this is like a really crucial, book that's going to carry the rest of the story. So he's just spending the extra time on that. But of course, the salacious part of the article is the talk of the Stormlight TV series or movie, and I watched another interview earlier today to prepare for, the next two topics that we're going to talk about. And it is just listening to the entire thing. It is just riddled with him talking about, oh yeah, we're talking to this company, and they can give me full they can give me all the control that I want, but they don't necessarily have the budget to do it right. And, what good is it if I have all the control, but yet we can't deliver because, he seems like he's really, really meticulously taking his time and like trying his best to really deliver like what the fans want to see in a television or, screen adaptation of some kind for Stormlight Archive.
Well, I mean, any adaptation to this is going to take a lot of computer generated stuff. Like, even if they build sets and stuff like that, and that's going to be, it's going to be a lot. Like any of the practical stuff they do, so you're going to have to drop a lot of money into.
I don't see how it's possible. I honestly, I want to see it so bad. And I can tell there's parts of it that I know that, like, just thinking about, I think about, oh, when my wife watched this show, 'cause she's never read the books, and would she watch it and like it? And there's a lot of things that I think that she would. I could really see the relationship between Adolin and Kaladin. Like, I could see that playing on screen, well, he
Bridge
calls
Boy.
Bridge Boy and Princeling, and they'd have this whole love-hate relationship where you'd see them eventually grow into comrades, and I could totally see that playing on TV.
Female characters too, so I mean, that's going to fit in with some of the females that may not be as interested in other things where they're portraying some of the strongest characters are female, and I think about Windrunners, so just even though I'm a little bit ahead of you, still haven't got to this part, but there's going to be a point where you're going to have bunches of people flying through the air fighting, and that's not something that's going to be cheap to put on screen.
It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be cheap to put on screen. And how do you do it without it looking corny? One thing I heard Brandon Sanderson say in one of his podcasts is the Spren. How do you portray Spren in a TV series? It's in a book. You're given the freedom to just write. You can just write Spren cropped up out of the ground, and the reader interprets that how they interpret it. Well, now every single person that has read that sentence has their own interpretation of what they believe that is. And so they've got to take that and put it on a screen and make sure that it matches the majority of those people's interpretations. They want to upset the least amount of people, but then two, it can't seem cartoony. It can't seem like on a cartoon, the illustration that Brandon gave was, we're on a first name basis, me and Brandon. Yeah. The illustration that he gave was like on a cartoon where someone gets bonked on the head and then birds fly around their head. Exactly. That's essentially Spren. And how do you make it not come across like silly on a TV series? And I don't know. I keep thinking almost like practical effects. Like whenever they talk about the death Spren reaching up and grabbing somebody as they die, I almost see like hands coming up out of the ground and but that would be so hard and expensive. If they do it in every episode, it's going to get expensive.
Sometimes he takes time to describe a certain Spren a certain way. Like Seal, when he says she takes a woman's form, that's easy. Not easy, but you can do that. But sometimes he just mentions Spren and doesn't give a description of them at all. They're like, there's Honor Spren or Joy Spren or whatever. And he just says what they are, not what they look like. So
or the creativity Spren or whatever it is. Whenever the women are drawing and there's all these little Spren dancing across their
dancing along with things.
That's so wild to think that a TV show would it's a fantasy. So Stormlight Archive is like a fantasy, but it's unlike any other fantasy. I mean, you can't compare it to Game of Thrones or, even Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's unlike any fantasy. And I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it on television. One thing I've heard is that there is a sect of the Stormlight Archive fans that want it to be animated. so that they can address a lot of these things that we're talking about. But I just know that
Make it easy.
I know that my wife is not going to watch an animated show. You know what I mean? Like I want it to have the appeal to the masses in the way that, like, you know, the Rings of Power do, the Wheel of Time. Like I want people to watch it that didn't necessarily read the book. And if they do a cartoon, yeah, they could do it justice. There's some really good, you know, cartoons out there or animated series. But like, yeah, I want it to be more mass appeal than that. And I think that's what I think Sanderson is specifically going for live action. I don't think animated's off the table, but the way I've heard him talk about it, he mentioned casting in this most recent podcast. That he even talked about the heights of the actors, and if it was animated, who would care how tall the actor is, you know? So
exactly.
So anyway,
one thing that he can definitely adapt is a tabletop RPG game.
That's exactly right. So the next two stories that we have in the news docket actually represent that. So we have a new set of tabletop RPG miniatures that is on Kickstarter right now. Oh, and I wanted to pull the Kickstarter up because I think I'm going to back this Kickstarter. And I wanted to see what it's at right now because
I like the Kaladin figure. It looks cool.
Yeah. So the coolest thing about this Kickstarter to me is that, like, we're getting to see official images of what these characters look like. Up to this point, Sanderson and his whole team have like let artists interpret what they believe the characters look like and what what is represented in the text, and they essentially have said, like, hey, just draw what you see whenever you read. Like, they give them some material to read, and then they just tell them, like, yeah, go off, King. Like, you draw what you see there. This is one of the first times where they've said they're going to take a more guided approach in telling the illustrator what they want, you know, Yasna to look like. They've even got Vale, what they want Vale to look like. Like, this is a much more, like, nuanced and guided post. Yeah, I did. So
that's crazy how much they've already got pledged. That is insane.
So currently they are at almost $2.5 million of a $50,000 goal. Yeah. Which,
that's insane.
They had to know that it was going to blow up that way. I mean,
as you're watching, two people have pledged while I've been sitting here watching.
It's going on until like October 13th. This is going to hit $4 million, I'll bet. Like,
oh, it's crazy.
It's going to do more than the Sanderson book thing that came out, which I backed, by the way. I need to go check on that. I haven't checked on when that's going to start and stuff. So I wanted to look at the pledges because I'm definitely going to back this because I want these miniatures. I love painting miniatures. I love Stormlight Archive. I definitely want to get these things, even if I never use them in a game. I want to paint some of them. One of the things I wanted to point out to you is that whenever you and I talked about what we thought the armor looked like, I think we were pretty damn close. So
yeah, I was looking at that too. That's kind of what I had in mind there.
We talked about that at D&D. We didn't even talk about it on the podcast. You were saying you saw it as the suits of armor in the first Thor movie with, like, where the plating like joined together, and I said it was similar to the video game Albion Online, the way they have their suits of armor. It's honestly, the way they have this miniature, it's a really close rendition of both of those things. I think if you were to take my description and your description and blend them together, I think we were pretty spot on.
Right.
But yeah, the coolest thing is seeing what their sort of more official interpretation of these characters. Dalinar, I do not picture Dalinar the way that he actually looks based on this. Kaladin is exactly the way that's exactly what I picture.
Did you see the pattern?
Yeah.
That is not how I picture pattern at all.
Yeah, pattern's wild. In his otherworldly, whenever you see him in the other world or whatever.
I guess that's what it
is. Otherwise he is just a pattern.
He's just a pattern, right?
But whenever there's a few times where she sees him in his real form, and he has that body with like a cloak and everything. There was somebody dressed up as Pattern at DragonCon.
Really, that's cool.
Yeah. I met some Stormlight people at DragonCon. So it looks like the pledge goes from $1, which I doubt you get anything for $1. Is that a pledge $1? Just look at the add-ons. Okay, so if you pledge $1, then the way Kickstarter works, I've only done this once. My first Kickstarter ever was actually the other Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter, and then shortly after that, I did another. Once you do one, it makes it easier to do more. I haven't gotten anything yet. I'm still waiting on both my Kickstarters to show up. So, the way it works is you pledge, but then after all the pledges go through, if it gets funded, which of course Sanderson's always does, then they you get like a second round of add-ons that you can add to your pledge. And so these lower level pledges are just like kind of get your foot in the door kind of thing. But yeah, after that they go from $30, where you can get the Bridgeforth Kaladin, Shallan, Blackthorn Dalinar, Assassin Zeth, Eshonai, and Seal for $30. But then it goes all the way up to, you can pledge as much as $475, and that's the all-in. You get everything. I don't know how many models that is, but there's even some that they've not revealed yet. There's a Wit and a Taravangian. Actually, I saw they haven't updated the website yet, but I saw Taravangian on the live stream that I just watched before coming on this podcast. They revealed Taravangian. A lot of
backers for that 475 too.
Yeah. Oh man, miniature collectors go wild. That's actually, I thought it was going to have a more expensive. 475 is the other Kickstarter that I've done was a miniature game for Zombicide. It was the Marvel Zombicide, and yeah, I think they went up to like $1,000 or something. Like they have way higher. Like 475 is actually pretty conservative for some of these tabletop.
I will say this too. I just realized we had a sort of spillages here. There's a Shardbearer Adolin.
Oh. Oh no! Oh no! I haven't got to that part yet.
I know, that's what I was like. He's not a Shardbearer when I've been reading. Because I kept thinking, Shardbearer Adolin. I was thinking Renarin.
No, Shardbearer Adolin. He has a shard blade. He has the he's got one of the
that's right. He's not a radiant.
He's not a radiant. Yeah. But I caught what you were saying. Yeah. Yeah. So, but you know what? Well, so I'll hold off on talking about that part of the book until we go over part 2. But I have some opinions about Adolin. In short, I just like the idea that Adolin was just like this badass regular guy. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Like not everybody has to have powers. He could just be a badass, you know? But anyway, we'll save that for part 2. So not only are they doing this Kickstarter for the miniatures, which I'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes. It's going on until October 13th. I'm going to back it. I'm not going to back it at $475, but I'm going to back it around $100 pledge probably, because I definitely want some of these miniatures. And in addition to that, they're also working with this same company, this Brothers
Games.
Yeah, who did, I don't know if you remember, I cut it out of the episode because it would just went on too much of a ramble, but like there was one episode where I was looking at Amazon during the show and I saw that there was a card game based on Stormlight Archive. It's this same company. Okay. They do a game called Call to Adventure, and they have other versions of Call to Adventure, but they did a Stormlight Archive version of the game, which I might also try to pick up. I love card games. This is a deck building game, so everything's all in one box. But they're going to be doing a pen and paper tabletop RPG for Stormlight Archive. And in the interview I listened to before the show, they are in like pre-productions. They basically have just said, "Hey, we want to do this, but we don't know what yet." And so they don't know what system they're going to use. They don't know like exactly when the setting is. They just know they want to do a Stormlight Archive pen and paper RPG. and it's going to be this company that produces it. But Brotherwise Games, but
They've actually done a tabletop Mistborn game, but it was a different company.
it was a different company. Yeah, so they're saying that this is not going to come out until like 2024, and I would dare if they're still in pre-production, it might take longer. Maybe towards the end of 2024. I guess it could be. But I was going to say
at the same time the book does or something.
We should research the Mistborn. We should look into that. I might try to find a copy of that book. Of course, now that this announcement has been made, there's a million other people that just had the same idea that I just expressed, and so it might be kind of hard to find it. But I would be curious as to how it plays. But yeah, this is a different. They said it's very unlikely that it will be similar mechanics. And the interesting thing in the interview is like Brandon Sanderson was like, "Oh, I'm going to be very opinionated about this. Like I play a lot of RPGs. Like I'm going to have a lot of opinions about the types of things I like to do in an RPG." But he didn't want to say anything on the air because he didn't want to like have any sort of like influence or anything like that, to the public just yet. But I really think 2D20. I think a 2D20 style RPG would be perfect for a heroic fantasy in the way that this is. So I wonder if they're going to lean into the idea that like you as a player can be a radiant, or if you're going to be just set in this world where radiance exists, but it's really hard to be one in game.
You have to maybe grow to that.
Yeah. I wonder how that's going to work. But if they want it to feel heroic, so the 2D20 system, that's why they always do like Conan, Star Trek. It's like a franchise, like IP kind of thing, because it really does feel like you're a hero in a story. Like you don't like when you play D&D, you feel like a citizen of this world, but you don't feel extra, powerful in any way. Whereas like 2D20 is like you can do some wild stuff. Like it's really heroic. So I kind of am hoping they lean more towards that kind of system, but yeah, they haven't given any clues yet. Just that it will exist, and yeah, you and I have already decided that when it comes out, we're gonna force our D&D group to play it, whatever it is.
Definitely.
We're the only two people in the group that are reading the Stormlight books, but we're forcing it upon them, and I can't wait. So yeah, I just got back from Dragon Con, and there was a Stormlight Archive presence at Dragon Con. I was curious driving there if there was going to be, because it's hard to know how popular a book series is. It seems like it's extremely popular because every time they put out a Kickstarter, it makes $3 million.
Right, exactly.
But it seems to be very popular. But at the same time, I don't feel like I could just walk up to anybody and be like, "Oh, how about that Adolin?" Like,
Exactly.
is Shalon going to decide she likes Kaladin better than Adolin? So like I can't. It's not so common that it's hard to have your finger on the pulse of how popular it is. But there was actually a Sanderson fan meetup at Dragon Con and I think it was organized by those fans. I don't think it was actually part of any of the con events, but all of the cosplayers got together to take pictures like as various Mistborn and Stormlight characters. And I found out about this because I saw a guy dressed as Kaladin. And I said, "Hey, are you Kaladin?" And he was like, "Yeah." He had like the thing on his forehead. He had like long hair. He was cut out to play that character. And he showed me pictures on his phone of the meetup. I didn't actually see the meetup, but there was like he showed me there was someone that took a picture with him that was dressed as Syl. So there was like a lady like all painted blue, and she had like swirls and stuff that she could put.
That's cool.
And yeah, I thought that was awesome that there was enough fans there that they could actually get together. And I also saw Adolin. I didn't know who he was. I could just tell that he was wearing a Kholin uniform, and I was just like, I think I might have like shouted out like, "Hey, are you a Kaladin?" And he was like, "No, Adolin." And I realized like, oh yeah, he's got short blonde hair, so he's Adolin. But yeah, that's pretty cool that it's that popular. You know, that they actually
cool.
have a Dragon Con presence. But this was the first year that we took my son to the con, and that was a wild experience. I talked about that a little bit on the last podcast, so I don't want to go into like all the detail that I did last week, but yeah, it's a wild place to take a kid. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably learned. Yeah, he probably learned a lot about himself at that con. But no, he was dressed up as Catboy and he was hamming it up. Everybody loved his costume. But John Jackson Miller was there. They have like a whole section. There was a ton of fantasy writers. There's a ton of writers there. But I didn't actually go to that section of the con. It was just all kind of a blur taking my son for the first time. We didn't really do a lot of stuff we normally would do. So I didn't really go to like where the like artist, we went to Artist Alley, but we didn't go to where they usually have like the writers and things like that where they sit. But there was a bookstore in the vendor hall that would have like a rotating seat where like every couple of hours they'd have an author out there signing books. And John Jackson Miller, I've talked about his books before because he writes Star Trek and Star Wars novels. And the Star Trek trilogy that I read, and I think I talked about in one of our first Fireside episodes, called Prey. It's a 3-book series. It spans all the way from TOS to like after Voyager. Like it spans the entire like Star Trek like franchise because it deals with a character from TOS era that is believed to be dead, and then I don't want to spoil the book, but it spans across all that. So you get Kirk, Picard, Tuvok, like there's characters from every series in the book, and it's really cool the way the book's written in that way, and it's a unique Star Trek story. It has some elements that I would say are not typically in a Star Trek story. Like for example, there's this whole sect of Klingons that I fell in love with, and I want to do a Star Trek RPG game where we do the Klingon ship, but we use these Klingons instead of the normal Klingons. They're called the Unsung, and they're Klingons that, you know, Klingons are all about like, oh, we are with honor, and you know they're all like, you know, they're like in your face, all full of honor. Like you wouldn't see many Klingon like rogue likes, you know what I mean? Well, like the Unsung are that. They're Klingons that are the descendants of people that have been like ostracized from the Klingon community. And so they grew up with like a different perspective on like what Klingon honor was. And like, you know, they're more like rogue-like and sneaking. They have like little splinter cells and like almost like little secret, you know, terrorist groups within the Klingon Empire that like are ready to like spring up, you know, at a moment's notice. They're a really interesting sect of Klingons, and that came from John Jackson Miller's story there. So I started to bring those books with me because I thought there was a chance that he would be there. And I was going to give him to sign a copy, but I backed out at the last minute. I was like, I'm not going to bring him. And I didn't actually look at the website to see if he was going to be there. But he was there. He had some Star Wars books on his table. I started to just buy something and have him sign it. But and I wish I had. Now that I didn't, I'm kicking myself. I wish I had. But I talked to him for a little bit, told him that I loved his Prey series books, but I haven't read his other books. But he's also got a Picard book series, and I know he's done some Star Wars books. I'm just not as familiar with those, but yeah, he was there. He's a good writer. Stuff. Yeah, have you by any chance read any of his Star Wars books?
I haven't read. He did. I think he did like one or two of the legacy things, but I think he's done more of the newer books, and I haven't really read many of the newer books.
I thought about picking. There was one up that like. There was one of the newer Star Wars books that was kind of getting good reviews, and I thought I might want to pick it up. But I've never really read. I've never been a Star Wars reader. Like I had one. There was like a bounty hunter. There's like a bunch of short stories with bounty hunters. I might have read a few of those, but I haven't read any of the
Pretty sure he wrote the Kenobi book. I believe that's right.
Maybe.
But yeah. I mean, I know he's done several of the newer books.
Yeah. But yeah, so he was there, talked to him for a little bit, and then Sanderson meet up, and then the only other note that I wrote down from DragonCon was I'm nervous about buying any fantasy novels, especially if they're from like an unknown writer. And I don't have this same nervousness for sci-fi. I'll buy sci-fi all day long. The more unknown, the better. But with fantasy, sometimes you read a fantasy book and it's just like you're reading someone's D&D campaign, and it just feels like there's no purpose to the writing. And maybe I'm spoiled as being a sci-fi. I've only recently gotten into fantasy. Stormlight Archive is basically what has broke me into fantasy. But I think Sanderson writes like a sci-fi writer, and I started reading the Dragonlance series. I started reading some other fantasy books, trying to catch up on some of the classics that, maybe I missed because I'm not a fantasy reader. And it just doesn't have what sci-fi has. A lot of times I feel like I'm just reading a story with little depth. I hate to say that.
Right. Well, I agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I'm nervous about buying a first fantasy book because I don't know if the writer is going to continue it too. Like, there was a lot of fantasy books that had really cool covers at DragonCon, and I wanted to pick them up and give it a chance. But at the same time, I was just worried that I'm going to spend time reading this, and then there's never going to be another, or there's going to be two more and then never another. Or, I bought a book not too long ago because it was in the top 10 fantasy on Audible. And so I bought it and I started listening to it, and I just couldn't stand it. Like I literally just couldn't, like, I couldn't keep up reading it because it was just so dull. And I mean, that happens in every genre, of course. I mean, there's so many books written by so many authors that, like, of course, a ton of them are that way. But I don't know. I think maybe because I'm new to the genre, like, I don't know how to judge yet, like, what is going to be a good one and what's going to be a bad one. And that's something I'm going to have to learn as I read more writers. But
well, there's also some fantasy, like, who is it? Is it Terry Brooks or somebody that does the Shannara? Mm-hmm. I forgot. But there's like 50 books. It's like, I mean, that's such a huge undertaking. You're just like, wow. Like, and then, like, it may be the same thing where there was one fantasy series where the guy dies, and then somebody else from the notes and everything picks up and finishes off.
Well, that happened in the Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson finished it. I didn't know this until recently. We've been talking about Sanderson every week, and I didn't realize that. I think Halen actually told us that, but at that time I wasn't reading Stormlight yet, and I didn't know who Brandon Sanderson was. But yeah, that actually happened with Wheel of Time, as the main writer passed away, and then the last two books were finished by Sanderson.
Yeah, so I mean, and then, like, I've never personally experienced it, but I know there's like a weird section of fantasy where, like, not kind of sexualized fantasy, and it's just weird, and, like, weird elves, and it's like, I don't know, that doesn't appeal to me either. And
I
I'm
know
like,
exactly what you mean. Yeah. That's why, like, I've been scared to stray from the Brandon Sanderson path, because I just know that he's not going to write like any kind of weird, like, sexual stuff. Right. Like, I know that it's going to be like, because that's one of the things, the first fantasy franchise you told me to read. Oh God, what was the name of it? And they do those audio drama style books. It's actually really popular. It's one of the ones I see in everybody's top 10s. And I think if you're into that type of fantasy, it's really Japanese influenced fantasy. For one thing, it's like feudal Japan kind of. What was the name of those books?
I can't think of it.
They had the Wet Boys. They had the Wet Boys. Everybody's yelling at their iPod now. I know, right? I just Googled wet boys to see if it would pull up the name, and it just it's just a picture of kids in swimming pools.
Oh, what was that?
Oh,
his name was
the Night Angel trilogy.
Yeah, Durzo Blint was the guy.
Yeah. Brent Weeks.
Brent Weeks
was the writer, but yeah, there's a lot of like I don't know. I couldn't get into some of the themes in that book, and it's hard. Like you don't unless you know about the writer, it's hard to know before you buy a book like what it's going to be like. That's one that I would go back to at some point.
Yeah, I enjoy it, but I didn't read it, so I only did the
audiobook.
The audio like move, was where they say movies for your mind.
Yeah. They did. I couldn't even listen to that. I tried. I couldn't even do it. It threw me way off trying to listen to it that way. But anyway, so let's talk about Horrorstor real quick. And then do like a catch up on where we are in Stormlight Archive, and then get out of this thing because we've got a pretty long podcast today. So Horrorstor, we may do a full episode on Horrorstor. Where Scott wanted to do it with us though, and we don't want to do a whole episode on it without Scott if it was like his idea. Right. So they're just going to briefly talk about it here, and then we'll maybe do a longer form thing in the future. But so this book was recommended by Scott, the author. I should have looked this up before. It's by Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix, yep, who does these sort of. I can see it's right up Scott's alley. I can see why he likes it so much. So it's like he writes these like nostalgia, like really like horror flick, kind of feeling movies. Right. Like you're reading a book that's written like a 90s or 80s like horror film, and
it's considered horror comedy.
Yeah.
That's what it says. Yeah. So I mean, like, I get that.
Yeah. I think there's some funny parts in it, but how much of the book needs to be funny for it to be considered comedy?
Horror comedy, yeah, right.
Because there's definitely some funny parts of it, but like, it's not all in all. Well, I don't know. I think the tone of the book is very unusual. That's one of the things I want to talk about.
Definitely.
I didn't dislike it, but it was very like casual, I guess. Like the way everything is worded, it's all in the mind of this main character. Is her name Alex? Amy. Yeah, it's all like in the mind of Amy, and she's very sarcastic and nonchalant.
She is your typical like retail worker who has lost all faith in humanity, essentially. Like
yeah.
It's just hates the world, hates her job.
And you and I have definitely been there.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, like things like that, I definitely registered with in the story. And then there were some things that just didn't make sense, but you gotta look past those things.
So like one scene, well, let's give the premise of the book, but I can think of one scene that didn't make sense to me. But like, so the premise of the book is Horrorstor. It's spelled like horror store, one word with no E. And it's a play on like a Swedish, like IKEA. Yeah. Only
they even mention IKEA. That's what's funny is they even mention IKEA.
It's not. That's what I was going to say. It's important to point out that it's not IKEA. Not only is it not IKEA, but it is another store similar to IKEA. But in this universe, IKEA also exists because that's one of the things.
This is an American store too, which is funny because they still use like the Swedish. The store is called Orsk. So everything's Swedish, and it's like, but it's from like Minnesota or something weird, and you're just like, okay, so they're just ripping off IKEA totally.
But the premise is the store is, it's essentially haunted, but the main character, she's been working at the store for a long time. She is She kind of feels like she's kind of stuck in this rut in life, and she doesn't know how to kind of move away from this. And I forget what spurs. That's kind of the weird thing about the book is like what spurs on why is this night the night? You know what I mean?
Right. I never understood that either, other than that they were just there that night. But then, like, later in the story, like, when you find out this main guy that's haunting the thing, he's been targeting these people.
Yeah, yeah.
But then they somehow all wind up there all on the same night, too. And I kept thinking, that's weird. Like,
yeah. So in my mind, I'm playing that off of the, like, okay, well, it's meant to be like a horror movie. I almost said cheesy horror movie, but it's like
it was definitely a cheesy horror movie.
Yeah, it's meant to be like a campy horror movie. So like that's what would happen in those types of movies. It would just be inexplicable that like every character had a reason to be there tonight, and this is
six
the night.
people are all there that just happen to be the ones that the main ghost guy is looking at.
Right. So essentially they start noticing weird things happening in the store. The like shift lead manager of the store is
Hazel.
Hazel. He is. I listened to the audiobook of this, by the way. I didn't get a physical copy.
No.
He's decided that they're going to spend the night in the store because they think that someone is breaking in at night and like moving things around and being destructive.
And they found like something like they thought it thrown up on some furniture, and it was really disgusting.
They first thought it was like a diaper had been smeared on one of the pieces of furniture or something. So the manager, Amy, and
another lady,
character, Susan, right? Or Susie.
Susie, I think I have it up here.
The three of them they're scheduled to be there all night, which I liked her, by the way. She was kind of, I guess you'd say Ruth Ann.
We're way
off. Ruth Ann. Yeah, you're right. It's been a little bit since we read the story.
So you got Basil, Amy, Ruth Ann, Trinity, and Matt. And that's your main characters.
So the three, Amy, Ruth Ann, and Basil, all have a reason to be there because they were scheduled to stay there that night. But like this is like it's just a random night. It's not like they do this every night for 2 weeks and then they finally come across a weird night. This is the first time they've ever done this, and it's the first night that the spirits of the store decided to show up.
Yeah.
And then the other two characters, they also just happened to break in that night. And
because they want to film a ghost hunter,
they want to film
YouTube thing.
Yeah, as we describe the plot more and more, I understand why it's listed as a comedy. So, like, they
but they don't want to be on. What is it? They don't want to be on.
I can't remember.
They don't want to be on A&E. They want to be on Bravo because the A&E shows are so stupid.
Yeah. They're too posh for A&E, so they're trying to do the other one. So that all the characters are there for this night, and I don't want to reveal too much of the plot because we'll do a spoiler-filled episode where we review it with Scott and everything. But the gist is there is, I'll say, maybe
it's kind of like the store was built on a former
prison
thing, and and so it's just.
It's the history that existed on this plot of land before the store was built that is causing the haunting. And the characters basically have to work their way through that mystery and then come to a conclusion with that.
Try and escape with their lives.
So Scott told me that the author of this was from South Carolina. And so I started, and it's written about a very obvious IKEA knockoff.
Right.
And so I started thinking, could he have been imagining our IKEA, the one in Charlotte or the one in Atlanta? I don't know where he lives in South Carolina. There's not one in South Carolina, but there's one in Charlotte and there's one in Atlanta. And my wife and I, we recently have made a lot of trips to both of those because we moved in 2020. and we love IKEA furniture. People talk about how cheap it is and stuff. I'm at an IKEA sit stand desk right now. They are cheap furniture, but they last. They're good furniture. They last a really long time. You just have to you have to be drunk to put them together. They only go together if you're drunk.
One of the things I liked about the book is the little interludes in between chapters where they'll describe a piece of furniture.
Yeah,
so good.
Yeah, they describe the furniture, but then they get more and more deranged as the book. As
then they get more and more
haunted.
Yes.
I think I suspect that it's the IKEA in Charlotte. If the writer was actually thinking of either IKEA, I believe, or maybe I've got it backwards. One of them has, right after you enter the sliding doors, there's an escalator that goes up. And that's where you take what do they call it in the book? The bright and shining pathway or whatever, the shining path. That's where you would start the shining path, would be to take the escalator up. And at the beginning of the book, that's what they described. The escalator was going in reverse or something like that. And Basil has to figure out how to fix it. And in my mind, I'm seeing that, even based on the description in the book, I'm seeing that entranceway.
Right.
And then
it's it's basically an IKEA. I mean, everything down to the Swedish meatballs and the cafeteria and all that stuff.
But that was another thing too, is the way they talk about how they had to get through the cafeteria to get to the escalator. All of that is I think it's the one in Charlotte. All of that is like the one in Charlotte. Yeah. It's very,
I've been to the one in Charlotte.
And at the end of the book, whenever it's filled with water and they have to get through, they have to basically swim through the first floor to get back to the door and all that stuff. I mean, the book is wild, by the way. I mean, it actually is a really good story. But all of that even fits the description of where that section of the store is located compared to the escalator entrance.
Right.
I'm really pretty sure that that's probably the one he was thinking of whenever he wrote it. But it also could their stores are so generic that it could just fit in any one of them.
All of them.
Even as I say that, I can't remember if it's the Atlanta one or the Charlotte one that has that layout, but they are different. But they're so similar.
I'm pretty sure the one, because I've only been in the one in Charlotte. I'm pretty sure when you go in, you go up to the escalators and start going right there.
Yeah, I think it is.
You make your way back around, and there's the cafeteria, and then down below is the warehouse thing where you go find furniture and stuff.
So yeah, it's a really cool. It's a really cool story. But
the one thing, all of the supernatural stuff.
Yeah,
I don't have whatever. It's funny and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but being a person that's been in retail for a long time, this place would have been full of cameras and motion sensors and all that. And a homeless guy living in there for a month would never happen.
Yeah, that's
and then
true.
Then Basil getting two women that are just regular employees
to just stay overnight. Yeah.
Just stay over so they can find these people that are caught. I'm thinking where's the GM at? Where's the store security people? Shouldn't they be all doing this? And Basil's described as the stereotypical corporate stew. He bleeds and recites everything, and everything he does in this thing is totally against what would be considered corporate. He would that person should never get these two people involved in this stuff. And then the other two people breaking in at to record stuff is just how are these people breaking it? What did they say? They put bubble gum or something over it. And it's come on now. This is this huge IKEA type store, and they just simply put some bubble gum over the lock just so they could get in.
Yeah, it's really it's really silly. Really tropey horror movie.
Right.
The
but
seance.
It was fun. The seance. The seance scene was
That's
funny.
the scene I was thinking was this doesn't fit in the story because it was I don't want to go over too much spoilers, but yeah, it just didn't fit. It was something happened that seemed like everybody in the room should be shocked by, and then they're just like, let's just do a seance.
Let's just do a seance. And then after the seance, they're just like, we should go search for so-and-so or so-and-so.
Yeah,
and you're like,
let's go
instead
back.
of like making a beeline for the door, like get the hell out of this place kind of thing.
Yeah. The one thing I did like is that the characters do call the cops. So like there is a point where the characters are just like, oh crap, call the authorities. This is too much. But then the cops are like, yeah, we can't find
Never heard of this place. They're like, what? What is this place? Orsk? What is this? And then they can't find it. And you're just like, I kept thinking like, okay, is like, or the demons in the store doing something? And then like, but then at the end, they're all out there. I don't know. That was all weird.
Did you ever play the game Alan Wake? It reminds me of Alan Wake. If you've never played Alan Wake, by the way, you got this fancy new computer. You need to play Alan Wake. It's right up your alley. It's like it's kind of apropos for this show too, because it's like basically it's a Stephen King knockoff character that he is writing a book, but it's the like things he's writing in the book seems to be happening kind of thing. But it's a good story, but there's these like shadowy figures that like kind of come out of this like otherworldly, part, and he has to shine a light on them is like his method of like stopping them. And whenever I was picturing the inmates or whatever they were called, the residents, that's what I was picturing was those like shadowy figures from Alan Wake. But the story is very Alan Wake-ish, the whole thing. But yeah, so I hope that we can do a full episode on Horrorstor soon. I thought it was a fun read. It was
a fun read.
It was quick. It was quick and it was fun.
It was.
Didn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, if you're just looking for a fun story where you just suspend all your belief and just
yeah.
It's right up there. I mean, I like I said, I enjoyed it. It was silly. It was funny. It was gross in some points. And like,
so
I got lost a few times and like what was going on, but
I like I said, I did the audiobook I probably would have read it a lot faster, but I listened to it in like a week. I think it took me to finish it. Riding back and forth to work, listening to it. It's pretty quick.
It is,
and it reads. I'm sure it reads fast if you were to actually read the book.
The female that read it, I didn't know her, but the guy that does the little interludes about the furniture, that's Bronson Pinchot. I don't know if you remember him. He was you remember a show called Perfect Strangers?
Oh man, I remember that name, but I can't think of the show.
And he played Balky. It was two roommates. There's a guy and then a guy from this country that's just made up.
Huh.
And he spoke with a weird accent. That's him.
Wow.
He played Balky.
That's funny.
And I was like, oh my God. He does a few. He did an audio book I listened to not too long ago. A Stephen King one. I can't remember what it was, but he does several audio books. So.
So let's touch base on where we are in Oathbringer. And I put here in the notes that I have burned myself out on Stormlight Archive.
Sort of had.
Yeah. So here's the thing though. The funny thing is that preparing for the podcast, I went and read all the news and, now I'm excited for it again. And I actually started reading it again today after doing that preparation. But for the last, basically I started Oathbringer when we went to Dragon Con. I think I started reading it around that time. And with these books, they're so big, I do physical and audio. And I've done most of the listening of Oathbringer, way more than I did the other two on audio. And I did a lot of it while I was driving, and I just feel like you're really good at audiobooks. I feel like I struggle with, I listen to it and then I question whether I really retained what I listened to, and so I'll either go back and listen to it again, or I'll go back and I'll go read that section again. But I feel like doubly so for some reason with Oathbringer. And it also just because of the podcast, because we have to read something and then immediately start reading something else, and then immediately start reading something else. I mean, I've read more books since we started the podcast than I would normally read in a year. I normally only read a few books a year, and we've already read like 4 or 5 for the podcast, and we haven't even been doing it for a year yet. So like, I'm reading way, and I'm glad. I'm glad, by the way. I'm not complaining, but I feel like I just back to back Stormlight books. I've just kind of gotten burnt out on the characters and what they're doing. And I know the books are great. Like, I'm not saying they're bad. I am storming burned out.
Right. Well, one thing that got me is I think, I don't know, maybe a week or 2 ago, I think you had asked me how far along I was. And I was like, I normally, it's just showing on Audible. If you're in the car, at least in my car, it just shows you the name of the book and the chapter you're listening to, but it doesn't show, it says the chapter number or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm on like whatever. And so I'm like, I wonder how far along in the book. I'm like, maybe I'm about halfway through. And I was like 3/4 of the way through part 1.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I started looking through and I'm like, there's 4 parts of this. And there's like 140 something chapters or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, it felt like such a gigantic undertaking. And I felt like I had taken so much in, and I'm barely scratched the book. And I'm like, oh my God, what else can happen in here?
And we went straight from Edge Dancer into this. And I wish we had picked, and you tried to talk me into it, but I wish we had picked another Dark Tower book in between the two. Because yeah, exactly. I just feel like I'm still reading the previous book. Like it just blurs together. And I really feel like I'm doing a disservice to Oathbringer by trying to cram it as fast. And then now we know we're not going to get book 5 until 2024. We need to slow down.
Right.
we're gonna have a year to wait at this rate.
The one thing about this book to me, it feels like it's all character building again. Like you in the first book, you get introduced to all these characters, and now they've basically all those characters have changed to being like
Radiance,
Radiance and things like that. And so now you're like it's almost like a reintroduction of the characters, and you're learning like Shalon, like now she's like 3 people. And so you're getting background on
that I want
like all that. Like
I wanted to talk about that. So it's okay. So we're on the discussion about why we're burnt out, but that's something I noticed is like before Shalon would do she would do the thing where like she wasn't willing to face the fact that she killed her mother. She wasn't willing to she just literally would just like block off that part of her life.
Right.
And the way Sanderson writes, where it's always from the perspective, like it's always from the perspective of that character, because she wasn't willing to deal with it. It wasn't in the book until she was finally ready to face it. Well, I've noticed that ever since that change, since now she was willing to admit it to herself and she's willing to talk to Pattern about it. Now she is like she's treating her other personas not just as, oh, I'm trying to hide. It was like, okay, I need to be more like Yasna in these situations. So now that's graduated to like what's she call it, Radiant or whatever,
Lady Radiant or whatever, like, and then Veil.
Now it is a whole nother character. Like it's not just an aspect she's trying to improve about herself. She is like she's like a totally different persona. And Veil always was. She made up Veil for that.
She made up Veil like originally to be able to sneak into places.
As a disguise, yeah.
As a disguise, but now Veil is a person.
Yeah.
And then whenever she needs to use her shard blade, it's the Lady Radiant person. That's a totally different person. Like,
yeah, but that still looks like her, because in the scene with the Midnight Mother at the end of part 1, she is doing the whole, like, she's projecting an image of herself over herself but
for herself.
it's of the stronger, more radiant version of herself that she wants the world to
Yes.
see.
Well, when she first introduces that person,
Mm-hmm.
she, because Adelyn's like, I want to train you. And then she says to herself, well, Shalon she can't do this. So she creates this radiant that can do this. And then she realizes, well, I can't change my looks too much because then Adolin will come back into the room and there'll be a totally different person.
Yeah.
So she had to change it to where it still looks like her, but it's a little different than her. Yeah. Whereas Vale is a completely different person.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in that part too, because Vale and Shalon their worlds are crossing a lot, because she's basically at Shalon's assistant, what she's kind of portraying. And then, now Vale has an assistant, and then Vale's using all of Shalon's army guys, to do stuff. And and the one thing that is weird too is I'm kind of interested in the concept of how she does this, because anytime she creates an external vision, it describes Adolin wisping through things, and it's it shimmers and stuff like that. So when she creates Veil, it's got to be that thing's got to be almost on her skin. How do people not notice shimmers or different things like that? So that's kind of just a weird thing. But she's one of the characters that's she's grown on me more than she did. And I don't think her kind of smart ass attitude is
it's toned down.
It's a little toned down.
Yeah.
Which
makes sense. Think about that for a second. So I don't know if that is a stroke of genius from Brandon Sanderson, or it just was a difference in, because he wrote these over the course of I don't know how many years, 4 or 5 years, however long it took to do these 3 books, and the book in between. Is she, whether it's intentional or not, is she? She's letting her. That was all a guard. She was doing the whole smart assery thing because it was she didn't want to deal with that, because she started doing it with her brothers after her mother died. And now she's doing it less, but yet she's more willing to face that part of her past. So maybe that's a sign in Sanderson's writing of her letting that go.
I definitely think it's purposeful, because I've noticed that
that's really good. Parts that, since Yasna has come back, she's gone back to that a little bit. Oh, yeah.
She's definitely more smart, and she's smart ass to Yasna too, which is very telling.
I've only where I'm reading now, I've only had a few chapters with her interacting with Yasna since she came back.
There's a lot more in their meetings and stuff like that, and because Yasna is still treating her as her ward, and Shalon's over there I'm a radiant, I'm not a war, and so that's a good little thing going on. And she's still got, it's kind of a trope in a lot of, not just this, but in a lot of stories, TV shows, that when people do things or they know things, and if you would just tell hey, this is going on, that it eliminates so many issues later on. And she is the quintessential character like that. She's got all these secrets.
She's had that in every book so far.
Right. And you would think she's infiltrating the Ghost Bloods and stuff like that. And she keeps telling herself, well, I don't want to say anything because that's who tried to, assassinate Yasna. But if you would just come out and say, hey, I've been approached by these people as someone else. And, I know she doesn't want to give up her Veil character, but still, why hasn't she learned to tell the truth at this point? I don't know. I get it and I don't get it, but I don't get it more than I do. If that makes sense.
She's done that. You pointed that out to me, but I've noticed it that she's done that in every book. In every book now, she's had some secret that she's kept from Yasna or from Yasna's mother,
Navani.
We forgot her name in the last episode we talked about her. We forgot her name. She has had a secret from one of those two in like every book, and in every book it was like not really a big deal. She should have just talked to him about it,
right?
Instead of making it a big secret.
Here's one thing I have a question about with her too, and the Ghostbloods. They know that she is Shallan and Vale.
Yep.
I can't figure out how they know this.
I think they explain it like in book 2. They confront her and let her know, like at the very end of the book, they let her know that they know, but I can't remember. And they probably explain it in that chapter, or they probably give a hint to it, but I can't remember. I can't think of it.
She shows back up in her room, and there's a note. The note that's about explain stuff about her brother. And
I probably haven't gotten to that yet. Okay. I do know that she just found out. So like, one of the last chapters I read before I quit reading, like I said, today I started back, so I'm gonna get back. But one of the last chapters I read before I quit reading, she had found out, but I want to say it was from like Adolin. Someone had told her that, it was. She mentions to Adolin that Amaran had her brother's shard blade. And then Adolin tells her that it was because of Kaladin.
Yeah. There's the I forgot what the guy's name, the head ghost blood guy was like, if you do this for us, we'll tell you a secret about your brother. And then she does it, and he sends her a note. The note shows up in her room, and she reads that note, and it tells about these other people that were trying to, find people to join their cause, and her brother was one of them. But then they left out enough things to make her want to know more. So yeah, I mean that's another kind of thing that you find out about is, and I enjoy the backstory of Dalinar.
Yeah, so
like what happened to him.
That's
like
one thing I wanted to
ago.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about was, so we got Dalinar's backstory, and in part 1, it's all about like how ruthless Dalinar was, which we had, all this time we've been hearing everybody call him the Blackthorn, and we'd heard stories about how like ruthless he was, but I kind of thought it was just like, oh, he's just this badass warrior, but he was still a just and noble warrior. But no, like apparently him and his brother were conquerors, like the past Dalinar
tyrant
was a tyrant. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to see, like, we know him as what he is now, and it's interesting to see like that stark comparison to what he was. And then now I'm at a part where I'm kind of gradually learning about how he became, how he got there, and a lot of it has to do with his brother, but also whenever he meets Evie,
his wife.
And so we get that moment where he hears her name for the first time, and I've only got a few chapters.
We find out how he gets his shard plate.
Yeah,
which is from them.
Yeah,
and then like the other thing is Oathbringer.
Yeah,
like everything else has been part of a book, and then there is a book Oathbringer, but Oathbringer is also his shard blade.
It sounds like the book is being written by Dalinar, though.
That's what I was wondering. Is that something from him?
It seems like it, because all the beginning, in the part 1, I think it might change in part 2. I just started part 2, but in part 1, all of the tops of the chapters are from Oathbringer, and they sound like they're being spoken from Dalinar's voice. So I think
that's what I kind of got out of it.
Yeah. I think it's something that he is writing at some point that we haven't gotten to yet.
Right.
But and they do the whole story with, you know, they're invading that city that's like in the cavern, and he kills like the leader of that city, and that's where he gets Oathbringer. And they make you believe in part one that he also killed the son, but then you find out
Right.
later on that he let him go.
Right.
Told the mother to keep him secret. That's where that's exactly where I am. Basically, is the last thing I read on Dalinar's story. Anyway, but yeah, as we're talking about it, I'm realizing that I do like the story, but I just I needed to take a break for a little bit just because
Right.
we've read a lot of Stormlight. After we finish Oathbringer, I probably won't pick up the fourth book for a little
Yeah,
while.
definitely.
We'll give it a little bit. But yeah, and yeah, with the news that the fifth book is gonna be 2024, I don't want to like catch up completely and then
And
yeah.
then 3 years in between books, apparently, after that, till you get to 10. So, right?
Whew.
Right? That's
Whew.
15 years from now
I
to
wanna
end the series. At least 15 years.
I wanna read I kinda wanna read Mistborn. And I want to read I know what I wanted to read. I want to read the Robert Jordan
Yes.
Wheel of Time. So I tried watching the show, couldn't get into
I
it.
haven't tried it. I haven't watched
I
that
couldn't get
either.
into it. It just didn't hit me. Didn't hit me the way the the Lord of the
Right.
Rings Amazon show did. Um, but I think I would like the series, and it has that Sanderson connection of that he completed it. So I want to maybe pick that up. Maybe that's what I'll do in a break from Stormlight. But I also want to do more of the definitely the next book we're reading is going to be Dark Tower related. I want to do more of Dark Tower.
So the other thing that we even have here in the notes is the thrill. So
Yes.
up until this point, I got the thrill as in like just the adrenaline rush of fighting or whatever. Like,
yeah.
Like when you do anything and it gets your heart pumping and stuff, you get like that that sensation. But in this book, the more it talks about it, it feels like it's an actual like
it's more than that. Yeah.
It's more than that. It's like something that takes you over, or I don't know if it's like I don't think it's like a sprint or anything, but it's maybe something similar to that.
Could be.
That like because he even talks about like there's which I don't know if you got to the part yet where he's fighting somewhere and the thrill takes over him so much that he almost goes over and kills his brother.
Yeah, that's in the same that's in the scene where he gets Oathbringer, or it's in that chapter. It may not be the same.
That's where he's fighting that shard.
And he kills a bunch of he kills a bunch of Alethi.
He just fighting and he stops. He realizes that he's just been mowing down people, and it's like
indiscriminately.
And so that's like it. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's more.
Maybe it is a sprint. I don't know, but like, it's definitely the more they describe it, it's definitely not just an adrenaline rush.
Yeah,
because I mean, he loses his mind, like legit loses his mind while he's in it. Doesn't know what's going on.
It's so interesting that in the first two books, they kept bringing up the thrill, but it really just melded its way into the story that you really just think it just means like they're just overcome with the adrenaline like and excitement, but it's
the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat type thing. That's what I had, and then like the whole thing about shard blades too, which you find out are like that's all shard blades are just dead sprint, and that's why it takes 10 seconds for you to pull your shard blade because you're essentially pulling their soul out of their version of the afterlife.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And then like Adelin's or Kaladin's, they're using their sprint. So Seal is his shard blade and it's instantaneous because he doesn't have to pull her from somewhere else. And that's also why, Seal was always against shard blades because she knew what they really were. That's all really interesting. Like, I
Before
like that kind of stuff.
before we move off of Oathbringer, I also I just typed in the
Safe
show
hand.
notes the safe hand.
I've always wondered. I wanted to
You
talk
brought it
about
up.
that
Yeah.
too.
I remember whenever you brought it up in an early podcast, you were like, "Oh, what's the deal with the safe hand? Like, what could that be? Why do they cover up the safe hand?" And like, I just said, "Oh, it's just some weird modesty thing, you know?"
Right.
But this book, it definitely means something more because
Right.
Shallan, whenever she presses her safe hand against the Midnight Mother, um which by the way, the Midnight Mother thing just came out of nowhere. Like,
Right. That was just.
there was a whole bit about this Spren that was like mimicking murders and stuff like that. But then it's like as soon as someone said, "Oh yeah, that's the Midnight Mother," everybody's calling her that, and it's like everybody knew what she was. All and it's like what, like, you know, I don't know. Maybe I missed the dozen chapters where they're talking about the Midnight Mother, but like it was just like,
And apparently, there's a whole lot more of them too that are called other things.
yeah. So she touches with her safe hand, and it's almost like she is like
a magic touch.
Yeah, it's like it's like it's almost like a special connection, like in a way, like
Right.
like because one thing I noticed in that scene is like she wants to make whatever that connection is. She wants to make it with the Midnight Mother, and she knows she wants. I don't know what she's trying to. I don't know if she's trying to prove to it that like they're not trying to harm her or like what it is. But there's a moment where she realizes, oh, I'm revealing the most vulnerable part about myself. Like she's going to see everything,
Right.
even that part that I keep secret from everybody. You know what I mean?
Like a Vulcan mind meld, but
Yeah,
it's both ways.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's like a mind meld. Yeah, that's I think that's why they cover up the hand. I think it's like an intimate thing. Like I think it's like not necessarily sexual, but very intimate. I think it's like
Right.
an emotional, you know, connection, and they don't want to like give that to just anybody, and so that's why they cover that hand up. I mean,
I don't think what I was kind of thinking about that too, and my thing was like you don't they talk about how when the desolate
desolation
desolations happen and how they lost, like after each desolation they lost knowledge and technology and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what I was like, you know, she could do this with her hand because she was a radiant and all this stuff. And I think I don't think everybody has that power, but I think it's something that had been
I'm wondering, man.
passed
I don't
down
know.
because
Yeah.
only the Alethis do it.
Huh.
Because like, you know,
oh yeah,
they
that's
talk
true.
about other women that don't cover their hand.
Yeah,
so I think it was something like the Alethis, maybe there was like radiance way back when that had that power and they kept their hand covered. And the part about hand covering just is what made it through, not realizing that only the radiance covered it because they had, you know, there was power in that hand. And now everyone just does it because it's considered, you know, the norm thing. You know, I don't know, it could be way off, but who knows?
No, you're right. There's other things like that too that I can't think of right now, but there's other things where it's just coincidentally because I can't think of it now. I'll have to next time it crosses my mind or I'm reading and I think about it, I'll have to write it down. So I just looked up the safe hand on a Stormlight Archive wiki, which, you know, there's probably spoilers here, but I just want to see if there actually is a so this is talking about the tradition of it, which we understand that. Safe pouch, yada yada yada. Further, the Alethi women to rest their clothes. So all this is having to do with just what I said, like the modesty of it. So in reading through quickly on the Stormlight Archive wiki, there is no mention like
definitive.
They just talk about it being a like a Vorin cultural tradition. They don't give it any mysticism like what we were just
And it
talking
could
about.
be something that comes up, in books he hasn't gotten to yet, too. So
Yeah, or it could just be that Shalon did that with the Midnight Mother, and it had nothing to do with it being her safe hand.
right.
I don't
But I
really
feel
know.
like it did because she,
Me too. She
if
took the
not,
glove off.
right? Why
Yeah,
wouldn't she do it with her other hand if
right.
that was the case?
Exactly. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I think it has to be some kind of connection. In an interview, Brandon stated that the tradition derives from a famous book written by an artist who claimed that true feminine pursuits and arts were those that could be performed with one hand, while masculine arts were those performed with two hands, in a way associating delicacy with women and brute force with men. He also compared it to the tradition of foot binding in China. Wow, that's interesting. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. But yeah, as far as we
right.
know right now, I guess it's just a foreign tradition. And but yeah, I don't know. Sanderson, he's so intentional with everything he writes. It's got another meaning for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, all right. Well,
So, as far as this book, we're barely into it. It's going to be
yeah,
a while before we get to the end of it. So,
yeah.
if we do a couple short stories or something just to kind of fill the void until we can do a whole, we still may have to break this book up into more than one part. But, if anybody has suggestions, like we said before, I put on here The Long Walk.
So, give me a synopsis on the long walk.
Dystopian type society in the future, where things are, commodities are hard to come by. Like every day, people live in poverty and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like if you maybe think of something like the Hunger Games type thing. You can volunteer to do this thing called the Long Walk, and if you win,
okay,
you get like you're set up, and essentially and I can't remember the exact details, but you start point A and you have to make it to point B. If you give up, you're followed by military, and if you give up, they kill you. If you fall below a certain mile per hour, they kill you. There's all kinds of things, and it's basically from the perspective of one of the guys that are in the competition, and it's really good.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
It's pretty outstanding story. So,
And then what is Knock at the Cabin?
so that was that's not a short story. Well, it's a book called The Cabin at the End of the World. I've talked about before, but they're making it into a movie called Knock at the Cabin.
Oh, okay.
And Dave Bautista is in it.
Okay.
And but the premise of the story is there's a family, a daughter and a husband, two husbands. They're at vacation at this very, very remote cabin, and these people show up, and they basically say, "We're here. We've all been sent here. The apocalypse is coming unless the three of y'all willingly make a decision to murder one of you."
I know about this one too. Yeah.
And I watched the trailer and it looks really good. And and I love the book was fantastic. So I can't imagine what the movie will be like. But yeah, I just saw that when we were getting ready and I saw the trailer pop up on my feed and I was like, oh yeah, I had to talk about that. But if it's anything like the book, it's going to be really good.
Which of the two would you rather do? Both of them sound cool to me.
Well, The Long Walk is definitely shorter. I mean,
okay.
Knock at the Cabin at the End of the World is a novel, so it's probably.
Because what I'll do is I'll listen to this while I drive to work, but I'll read Oathbringer. I gotta start setting aside like an hour or something every night to read.
I would say we listen to The Long Walk, and then do that because it's shorter, and then. We can talk about maybe some other ideas for short stories, or I mean, that's not a very long novel, so it might be doable. but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I want to bring in some other things. Because that's all I've been doing is Oathbringer. I haven't been listening to or reading anything else.
Yeah, I know. It's good, but it's we have done. I mean, if you think about it, if you're a Stormlight fan, it took you years to get this material, and we have just done it in like a matter of months, and like we're doing it a disservice by doing it that fast. We got to slow down.
Right. Exactly.
If it wasn't for the podcast, I would have taken more time between books because
I would have to.
Yeah.
And then we still have the other Dark Tower.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that.
Throw in there because it's not. The third book isn't quite as big. It's
bigger.
Next book. It's bigger than the first ones, but it's not as big as
the next ones. Yeah,
the next ones either. So
yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'll look for the long walk on audio, and then
I just put it in that. It's listed separately in that Google Drive.
Oh, okay.
It's by itself, so it is part of the Bachman books, but it's separated. So
okay, and I guess that'll be the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. We'll get together again next week and give our progress on the short story and how Oathbringer's going, and then that'll be that. So
we'll go from there.
Thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.
Peace out.